What's a thing that is dangerously close to collapse that you know about? The Ogallala Aquifer. You know how Kansas and Nebraska are known for essentially being endless fields of wheat and corn? Well, they do that by drilling wells to one of the world's largest aquifers, deep under the Midwest. There isn't enough consistent rainfall in those areas for all those crops, so, well, water makes up the difference. But we're draining it, and it can't be replenished. Once it's drained, it's Dust Bowl 2.0, and no more large-scale farming in the Midwest. I don't know, but every time I go to a drugstore, it feels like we lost a war. Worked for CVS for the better part of 15 years. Around 2008 to 2009 the original leadership retired, and a bunch of former executives from Macy's and JCPenney's were brought in to run the front store side of the business. Their philosophy was that the only way to control profitability was to control payroll. Went from a store that at one time was budgeted 700 payroll hours per week to 230 per week several years later, all while doing the same sales volume, year over year. I don't know why pharmacies thought selling more than just a few essentials would be profitable in the long run, if it is at the cost of having a high-quality pharmacy. When they are paying pharmacists and pharmacy techs solo, that you can't hire enough to fill all your positions, and the pharmacy is just randomly closed due to staffing, you have a problem. Nobody will be buying retail items from your store. Americans are on the highest amount of pharmaceuticals than ever before. Why not ensure high quality and a loyal customer base? Because right now, people are just switching to mail order delivery, and I know Amazon will put my packages where they won't be stolen. And CVS will. The Rio Grande levees, in El Paso's Upper Valley, are old and need repair, and will fail in a major flood. The low-lying suburbs, in the Upper Valley, were recently deemed to be in a FEMA floodplain. Just last week, a poor kid in Juarez was dragged by flash rainwater after leaving school. The body was found a few days later. I was in Juarez when all this happened, and wondered if El Paso would eventually have similar issues due to the levees. RIP to Rafi. There's a waste product of burning coal, called fly ash. We use it in concrete. It makes the concrete better and cheaper. Nobody is building new coal power plants, and old ones are shutting down. It's getting harder and harder to source the ash. If we have to source it from far away, like China, the transportation costs erase the cost saving. We can get the same concrete with just cement and added chemicals, but it's more expensive. In 10 years, we probably won't be using it at all. It's a really minor thing that will have far-reaching consequences. Architects and engineers will probably look at ways to reduce concrete in their buildings as the costs increase. It's not likely to impact residential, but big downtown architecture is sure to be affected. The Florida citrus industry, specifically oranges. There is a fungus that is spreading and infecting groves across the state. Unfortunately, we have no way to kill the fungus. The only solution is to cut down all citrus trees within a certain radius of an infected tree. Many farmers are choosing to sell their farm rather than try to start all over. Former Florida citrus farmer here. The disease is called citrus screening, spread by the Asian citrus psyllid feeding on the tree. It takes roughly 2 years for an infected tree to show symptoms. By that time, it's already too late. The disease slowly chokes off the tree from taking in nutrients, crippling it, causing heavy fruit drop, and smaller fruit size, eventually killing the tree. The disease has no cure, and has already wiped out over 90% of the industry in Florida. The true American middle class. You are either upper middle class, or working poor. The middle class has eroded steadily for at least 30 years. I heard someone say, the only variable separating the middle class from the working poor now is that middle class are homeowners. Granted, that's a big generalization, but it kinda tracks, at least to me. Yeah, and there doesn't seem to an end in sight. Good paying, long-term jobs are pretty much non-existent for college grads. And even less so for those without degrees. Then there's the tax structure. Nothing beneficial to the middle class in it. The Garzenda, one of 2 remaining 12th century towers in Bologna, Italy. I saw them in April. It looks pretty ridiculous, to be honest. They have the area blocked off by some shipping containers, because that tower's probably going to fall any day. It looks like there are some half-hearted restoration attempts happening, but no idea what their plan is. Without human intervention, your local energy grid is only about 6 to 24 hours away from complete collapse. depending on how greedy the utility company is, in terms of automatic backups. The electricity grid will likely fail first and within hours. Other energy sources, like city heat or natural gas, will take longer, because those rely less on active human inputs. You remember, in the Last of Us TV show, how Nick Offerman is in a Home Depot, the power goes out, and he remarks, "That was fast." That bit was much more accurate than anyone not involved in utilities would ever care to know about. The young childcare industry. Increased regulation to make facilities safer, a very good thing, had the unintended consequence of increasing costs for owners. You now need more teachers who have training and certification, not to mention the patience and stamina to work with young kids all day. The pay is comparable to fast food without the benefits. Owners have to find a way to pay teachers enough to retain them, while keeping costs down, so parents can afford to send their kids. It's damn near impossible, without an infusion of government investments. I'm currently searching for a job, and was shocked to see the local daycare was offering $14 an hour with no benefits, to care for people's infants. A big gas station chain just built a new gas station in town, and is paying $16 an hour, and is offering 401k matching, to ring up people's donuts and chips. Minimum wage in my state is $16 an hour. The local burger chain starts associates at $19.50. I make $21 an hour, as a pharmacy tech, where I could make potentially fatal mistakes, if I'm not careful, and where I'm responsible for tens of thousands of dollars of medications and controlled substances. I have thousands and thousands of dollars of pills, literally flowing through my fingers, every day, but with that level of trust and responsibility, I could literally just go work at the local burger place, as a shift supervisor, and probably be making more money in 6 months. How is this sustainable? Lots of things, according to r/collapse. Personally, I live in a city called Lowell, Massachusetts, and there's the Rourke Bridge built 40 years ago, that was meant to be temporary. Honestly, it reminds me of those horrible scary bridges you've seen over rivers in Siberia, or some other place in Central Asia. It's loud and bumpy, and you can feel the whole thing sway, because it gets 25,000 cars crossing it every day. Not only that, you can actually walk under it, since there's a riverwalk pathway it connects to, and you can see rusted sections just rotting away. About 6 months ago, a truck crossed it, and a panel on the surface somehow seesawed up into the gas tank. The truck made it across, but not before losing probably 80 to 100 gallons of diesel, onto the bridge, and into the river below. The river had a marshy and swampy area near the bridge, and you could see the fuel slick, eddying and collecting into that area. I can't imagine much survived underneath. I'm sure a lot of fish eggs and small aquatic animals died down there. The city, state, and feds have known this bridge needs replacing for decades, and they know about the rust and rot, but they continue to say that it will last for now. Don't they always say that, though? There is a plan to make a new one next to it, but it won't be done until 2028. Which we all know means it'll probably drag on into 2029, 2030, etc. I honestly don't think it will last that long. The Colorado River, as the main water supply for 3 states with major cities. Don't forget the volume of water from that river that the US is obligated to let get to Mexico. That's why there is an entire valley in Arizona with tile just under the surface. It's so that they can recoup the water that doesn't get taken up by the plants, and send it back to the system, or onto Mexico. In case you're curious, this valley is just outside Yuma, and provides North America with the bulk of its lettuce during the winter months. In Arizona, our politicians sold land with ample groundwater, at a very big discount, pennies on the dollar, to Saudi Arabia, so they could grow alfalfa here. Apparently, it is illegal to grow in Saudi Arabia, because of the amount of water alfalfa requires. On another note, one community called Rio Verde decided it had enough of taxes, so they built itself just outside the Scottsdale city limits. Of course, developers built more homes and schools, but no infrastructure for things like water. Scottsdale, the nearest city, was providing water at a cost but spent years saying, January 1, 2023, you will be cut off. Scottsdale City Council spent years giving them information for building pipes and whatnot. Rio Verde didn't do anything, and they were cut off. After months of being without water, the residents protested at events like the Super Bowl with their dehydrated children, like that was going to help their cause. They eventually agreed to what Scottsdale suggested. The 4th graders' little black market that they run from the girls' bathroom. I'm close to getting the kingpin. Nothing will get past this teacher. Update: since some have asked, they sell Pokemon cards, pencils, snacks, and even sunglasses. I love that my students are quick enough to sell, but they have been guilty of price gouging. I want them to be driven, but not to be thieves. I grew very poor. I was my family's errand girl, since I was 6. Every store in the neighborhood knew me. I got a job at one when I was 9. Got $5 every day to just stock stuff. I would buy a couple of items, and resell them back to my fellow classmates. Rinse and repeat. With the profits, I would get my sisters and I, pizza, Chinese food, or anything cheap to eat. My stepdad was a drug addict and he didn't care for us. My mother was in the hospital with my little brother most of the time, because he contracted tuberculosis and meningitis at age 2. So, we would only see her every 4 days. She trusted our stepfather to watch over us and feed us. Veilp, he didn't, so even if it was one meal, I could provide a day for us with my little black market. It was enough. I just read your comment and thought of this. My high school had a candy man. He didn't have the worst home life, he seemed like he came from a happy home and everything was fine, and they were just struggling financially. He started buying up those booster boxes of candy kids sell as fundraisers, and just walking around school, selling them. For his own profit. He made probably thousands. Before the school noticed he was suspiciously always carrying the little cardboard fundraiser suitcase around. I bought from him sometimes. We had a couple classes together, and our families attended the same church. He was very nice and wholesome and never said, or did anything out of the way. They suspended this young entrepreneur, and made a huge example out of him, and I'm still salty about it. He was a good kid. All he did was sell Snickers bars. And I get that it was against the rules, but maybe just ask him to stop? Or have him join the future business leaders or something? Publicly traded companies, constantly being like, we did good, not great. More money next quarter. Oh, that's good, not great. Even more money next quarter. In the 4 years I've been with my company, my production quota has tripled, and it's unsustainable. Every quarter has to make more money than the last, otherwise it's failing. This is almost every single publicly traded company. Corners being cut, profits maximized, employees compromised. It's endlessly happening. Healthcare in the US. I'm not talking about paying for healthcare in the US, I think that's fixable. You can cut the costs by 30%, by making it all covered, by Medicare for all. I'm talking about actually having enough physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants to treat everyone. Burnout has gotten a lot worse in the US. Almost every physician I know is talking about retiring within 5 years, or at least cutting back dramatically. The big problems. 1. Not enough medical schools and residency programs to train physicians. My hospital is in need of just about all specialties. Pre-med programs remain as a weed out for medical schools, which just means we need more medical schools. We make up for the lack of them by importing physicians from other countries. We need more medical schools, and weed out a lot less potential graduates. Pre-med undergraduate courses include calculus, biology, chemistry, biochemistry, organic chemistry. I'm not saying any of them need to be removed. Just make enough medical schools that the medical schools will take B's in these courses, then require almost perfect GPAs for admissions. I can guarantee that almost no physician uses any of these courses in their day-to-day practice of medicine. If they did, it would be required in their continuing medical education, which it is not. 2. Too much paperwork. Too much hoops we have to go through on a regular basis. Not just the 100+ hours of continuing education, the quarterly tests to keep our board certifications up to date, the every 2-year basic life support and extended life support classes we have to take. Now there is mandatory education for opioid abuse, child welfare, and God only knows what else. Also, every 2-year licensing by your state medical board, DEA certification, etc. 3. Too much competition in an area, forcing physicians to compete with each other, and therefore, burning us out faster. It also means more duplication of effort in an area. 4. Most physicians now work for health networks and big business, which means less leniency when we need something. For example, need to take a day off? You need to put it in the calendar 3 months in advance. You want to buy a stethoscope? It counts as part of your tech purchase for the year. Yes, a stethoscope, not an electric one, is considered tech, just like a phone or computer. 5. Patients have gotten a heck of a lot more demanding, and aggressively so. Everyone Googles up their problems, and thinks they have the most rare BS disease. No one wants to listen to their physician's advice, and just give time to see if things get better on their own. And if the physician doesn't say exactly what the patient wants to hear, the patient screams it from every website and review place, so everyone else thinks the physician is an idiot. You don't like what I say? Please go elsewhere. I don't have time for your BS, and the fact that you think you are the 1 in 10 million 20-year-olds who actually has a congenital cause of heart attack at your age. By the way, I see number 5 on Reddit almost every day. I sometimes comment about it, and get downvoted to oblivion. Now I just sigh, and move onwards. I won't convince people that unnecessary testing is, almost certainly, not going to make them better, and more than likely, cause more anxiety, when a result comes back not exactly what they expected. P.S. Sorry for the rant. Just a burned-out physician, taking a couple minutes off, before getting back to work, on a Sunday morning. Cut me a break. I've been working 14 days in a row now. Most weeks not this bad, fortunately. Well, topsoil is getting super depleted. What used to be yards-deep fertile soil, is down to inches. Washed, or blown away, due to agriculture and irrigation. Rotational planting with crops, like chickweed, which are allowed to die and rot down. Chickweed grows well in depleted soil, because it has long roots, that reach down for nutrients. They concentrate in the plant, and then rot into the topsoil, coupled with seed drilling, instead of plowing. Plowing destroys worm burrows, and fungi networks, can bring it back, though. Literally all infrastructure in North America. The majority of underground infrastructure, pipes, water lines, sewer systems, has been completely ignored in terms of maintenance, and has been totally ignored in terms of budgeting replacing the assets. There are towns that have coming bills of tens hundreds of millions, not even mentioning larger cities, that have saved approximately 0% of the required amount, by constantly pushing out the lifetime estimation of the assets. Lots and lots of bills are coming due shortly, if the engineering estimates are accurate, and very few towns have saved anything for this scenario. We're basically living in a world, where no one wants to be the person to say, that we need to save money for long-term planning, and instead, everyone hopes things don't fail, while they are leading, and they can pass the buck. From what I understand, the internet as we know, I don't know the ins and outs, but a lot critical internet infrastructure, is open source, and being maintained by volunteers. I've seen this picture quite a few times. Anyone with more knowledge about it, please elaborate. Some guy had a free, public codebase for library functions, that was used by other developers. He started getting legal hassle from a company using the same name. Rather than go to the trouble of renaming things, he deleted a chunk of code. Turns out, that precise piece of code was very, very widely used. Result, internet outage. In another case, involving free code for secure connections, an overworked developer was happy to get support from another hobbyist. Turns out, the helper was a Chinese hacker, who compromised the software. The change was only noticed by another geek, wondering why his connection was running, if I remember correctly, hundredths of a second slower than previously. So, turns out, that a lot of powerful, free software, used widely to support internet infrastructure, is written, maintained, and shared, at zero cost, by hobby developers. IT knowledge. There are several factors at work, here. Colleges are mostly a few years behind trends, if not more. So, a lot of recent grads are way behind from the gate. Most colleges are now just shills for business licenses called degrees. You need this license to be allowed to have an entry job, and they know it, and charge whatever the market can bear. Pearson VUE has seized a huge amount of this space, which just adds to the cost, and tries to enforce certification tracks with government contract specs and all sorts of inroads. The cash cow of graduating college with six-figure jobs waiting for them, is mostly gone. The junior roles have been outsourced overseas, and have been replaced with people with multiple hats. There are very few middle roles, so, the track of going from junior to senior, has a huge gap, that keeps getting wider. The senior roles are starting to age out, many went into management, and some are retiring. Knowledge and experience is getting lost. Companies reliant on technology to serve, are cutting technology costs as a cost center, because of the pressure of rising capitalism always producing value year to year. Thus, they send more jobs overseas, and senior roles become too costly to maintain. We are incurring a lot of debt in aging infrastructure, and IT is no different. There are systems operating high-cost operations in factories, transportation, and utilities that haven't been upgraded in decades, and some of the people who knew how it all worked are dying off. Eventually, there won't be enough senior roles to teach your younger people anything, and there will be a cascading series of knowledge gaps in current infrastructure, leading to huge failures. People say that kids today know computers, but they really don't. Most only know GoAway, and how to operate an iPad, not what makes the iPad work under the hood, or how the internet works. Chrysler and Dodge. Many dealers can't get rid of all their 2023 models from last year, still sitting on the lot. Time to resurrect the K car. It saved them in the 80s, and it can do it again. Yup. I contract for most of the big ones. Stellantis is in full crisis mode, and is being hit the hardest. In a surprising turn of events, GM seems to actually be reinvesting, post-COVID, in smaller, more affordable, appealing vehicles that apply to most markets, including the US. Best example would be the Chevy Trax. Little crossover, small gas-sipping, reliable engine. Has most of the features people want, with a price tag well under $30K. The UK criminal justice system. Edit, for any non-Brits passing through. The new government has had to announce it's releasing prisoners early, because it's got no space for incoming suspects on remand, and new convicts. The last government shut like half the courts, the remaining ones are falling apart and understaffed. There aren't enough judges, so there's a 2-year backlog of serious cases. The junior end of the profession are so poorly paid, they've been on strike repeatedly. And let's not forget, the police had basically stopped investigating shoplifting and other smaller crimes. This, after 14 years of the Law and Order Party being in power. Thank goodness, the former chief prosecutor is now prime minister, so maybe there's a hope of fixing it. Had a drunk man come to my front window Friday night. Window was cracked for the breeze. He softly knocked, then pulled the window open, and popped in the window, then back out. My husband went out to confront him, and the man started yelling at us to go back to America. We are American. The man got in his car, after he saw me taking pictures of his plate and speaking to 999, and backed out of our estate. Police didn't even dispatch, just sent me an email, thanking me for reporting suspicious activity. The education system. We have maybe 10 more years, before a whole section of teachers retires, and then we're absolutely screwed. 50% of teachers quit within the first 5 years, and that statistic is much higher for SPED teachers. We aren't going to have anyone to work in the schools. Get ready for your kids to be taught by an online program, with a person who babysits 50 kids at one time and has no training. It's going to get bad fast, even faster in bad union states. And if you have a kid with a lot of support needs, truly, I don't know what they'll do. I work with that population, and we currently are missing 2 teachers, and 3 others are on emergency permits. It's a huge problem and keeps getting worse, because the pay is so bad, that no one wants to work with these students. I went to the hospital on Friday, from a bite from a student, truly a manifestation of his disability, who desperately needs a 2-to-1, but the district is making it impossible. I barely get to teach, cause I'm putting out fires all day. Why parents will storm PTA meetings over a book with gay characters, but are totally fine with their 8-year-old kid sitting in a classroom with 36 other kids, 4 of which need additional support, and should be in a self-contained classroom, but aren't for inclusion. Don't want to pay a certified special education teacher, with 1 adult, is beyond me. I used to get these emails from parents, demanding I pay more attention to their child, as if I could, when I had to put out fires, from the one kid who would throw things randomly at people, while keeping a super close eye on the kid who would run out of my classroom, while also differentiating instruction for the other kid, who could not read, while also giving instruction to 30+ other children, in a 45-minute time frame. I'd later get blamed for not making a concentrated effort to give each child individual attention. So glad I left. A lot of subscription services, not just like streaming services, I'm talking about the big corporate software subscriptions. I work in tech, and there's a very real panic going on at a lot of these companies, because they built their entire network and service at a loss, funneled hundreds of thousands of investor dollars into a product, with the idea that they would raise the price after and make it all back after getting a foothold. But here's the thing, the cost of running a live service program is much higher than just selling a license and letting people install the program and use it locally. You need servers, You need virtual machines, not to mention the person-hours difference between occasional software updates of regular software and a live service. So, not only do they have to pay back that loss leading, they also need to make enough to keep up with running the service. They get in and they spread as far as they can. They reach every possible customer. They do what they planned on and jack the price, now that they have dedicated users. But it's not enough. There just aren't enough customers to ever actually make the money needed to pay back their loans and run the company. Either your product is too niche, or there's too much competition, or in some cases, you're literally selling to every potential customer, and it's still not enough to pay back your lost leads. And by the time they realize this, they can try raising prices, but at this point, some other company is going to be in the lose money get customers phase, doing the same thing you are, and if you raise the price again, this quickly you're going to breach the trust thermocline, and the customers you do have are going to jump ship, and you'll make even less money. A lot of companies jumped on the software as a service train that was so successful for Microsoft and Adobe, but the thing is, they already had a shit ton of money to throw at projects they could loss lead and just eat the losses. Smaller companies don't have that luxury, but they made it seem so lucrative and easy that thousands of companies are slowly hemorrhaging themselves to death trying to replicate it.